History does not knock loudly. It slips in softly, sits beside you in the dark, and changes everything while you are still deciding whether to stay awake tonight, quietly, unnoticed. Many listen quietly here, night after night. If this calm travels with you, you may stay. Subscribing keeps this silence alive. It is evening in Britain, sometime in the year we will later call 410 AD, though no one alive tonight has the slightest idea that this number will one day matter. Numbers rarely matter while they are happening. The sky behaves as it always has, unbothered by human timelines, slowly shifting from a tired gray into a deeper, heavier blue, as if the night itself is settling in to listen. Smoke curls upward from hearth fires, not in alarm, but in routine. Supper has ended. Pots have been set aside. Dogs circle, decide the world is safe enough for now, and lower themselves to the ground with a sigh that suggests trust. Somewhere along a Roman road, a cartwheel creaks one final time before darkness politely but firmly claims the path ahead. Nothing looks dramatic. Nothing looks historic. And that, inconveniently, is how history usually prefers to begin. Rome has not fallen here. That part is important. Britain has not been conquered, burned, or ceremonially abandoned with trumpets and speeches. There is no final parade, no bronze eagle lowered into a crate, no general delivering a speech about honor and destiny. Rome has simply left, quietly, practically, like an overstretched landlord who decides a distant property is no longer worth the repairs. For decades, Rome had been pulling away already. Fewer soldiers, fewer coins, fewer instructions from far-off emperors whose names blurred together and changed too often to remember. Britain was expensive. Britain was cold. Britain was, from Rome's perspective, very far away and increasingly irrelevant. So one day, no one is quite sure which, the legions stop coming back after patrol. The pay chests stop arriving. Orders stop being answered. And the empire, which once called itself eternal, clocks out without a word. Tonight is the first night Britain feels it. The Roman roads are still there, stretching straight and stubborn through fields and forests, refusing to curve for hills or swamps. They look solid, confident, permanent, the kind of roads that suggest someone is still in charge, but there are no boots on them now, no armor catching Torchlight, no clipped Latin commands echoing between stone markers. The roads wait, unused, like a stage after the actors have gone home. In the towns, the walls still stand. The gates still close. The watchtowers still cast long shadows as the sun sinks. But for the first time in generations, no Roman soldier climbs the steps to take the night watch. No sentry adjusts his helmet, muttering about the damp. No officer counts heads and curses the paperwork. The towers are empty, not destroyed, just unattended. And that distinction matters more than anyone yet understands. This is not the end of the world. That is almost disappointing. Children still eat dinner. Bakers still close their shops. Someone still complains about the price of grain. Life continues with an irritating sense of normality. But beneath that surface is something new, something unfamiliar. The absence of authority. Not the violent kind of absence that comes with invasion, but a softer, more unsettling one. The kind that feels like discovering, late at night, that the lights are on, but no one is actually home. Rome governed through presence, through routine, through the quiet reassurance that someone somewhere was in charge. And tonight, for the first time in nearly 4 centuries, Britain exists without that reassurance. The empire has not said goodbye. It has not even said good luck. It has simply stopped answering. Somewhere in a former fort, a Roman standard still leans against a wall, forgotten. Somewhere else, a ledger sits unfinished, the last entry never written. Somewhere, a soldier has already boarded a ship south, convinced this province was never worth the trouble anyway. Rome does not collapse here. It disengages. A polite word for abandonment. There is something almost ironic about it. Rome, master of ceremony, builder of monuments, lover of grand gestures, chooses silence for its exit. An empire that conquered with spectacle leaves Britain the way a tired worker ends a shift. No applause, no announcement, just the quiet certainty that tomorrow is someone else's problem. And Britain feels that shift immediately, though it cannot yet name it. The night feels different. Not louder, not more dangerous, just less supervised. Without Roman patrols, the darkness stretches a little farther between villages. Forest edges seem closer. Sounds carry differently when you realize no one is officially listening. Even the stars overhead feel sharper, colder, as if the sky itself has noticed the lack of organization below. People sense it in small ways. A door is barred more carefully than usual. A fire is kept burning a little longer. A man pauses before stepping outside, listening, unsure why he suddenly feels the need to be cautious. No alarms are raised, no panic spreads. This is not fear yet, it is uncertainty. And uncertainty, given time, is far more corrosive. Rome once promised order, law, stability. Tonight, all of those things technically still exist, written down somewhere, carved into stone tablets, remembered by men who once enforced them. But without soldiers, without pay, without authority backing them, laws become suggestions. Suggestions have a way of dissolving in the dark. The irony, gentle but persistent, is that Rome believes it has done nothing dramatic at all. From the imperial perspective, Britain is simply no longer worth defending. Resources are needed elsewhere. Borders closer to home demand attention. Empires, after all, must be practical. Eternity is expensive. So Rome leaves behind roads it will never walk again, walls it will never man, and people who were told, explicitly or not, that they were part of something permanent. It turns out permanence has a flexible definition. Tonight, Britain stands at the edge of a long silence, though no one would describe it that way yet. The lamps flicker. The wind moves through grass and broken stone. The empire that once claimed this island has ended its shift without filing a report. An empire that lasted centuries has chosen not to make a sound on its way out. And in that quiet, something begins. Not with fire or steel, but with the unsettling realization that the night has no guards anymore. The Roman stone, roads at night, when infrastructure no longer has an owner. The night deepens, and Britain reveals what Rome has left behind. Not speeches, not promises, stone. Roman roads cut through the darkness like deliberate thoughts. Straight where nature never intended straightness. They run across hills instead of around them, slice through forests without apology. and ignore old tribal paths as if they were childish guesses. Even now, under moonlight, they look confident, unyielding, certain of themselves. Roads built by people who assumed they would be used forever. The stones are still warm in places, holding on to the memory of the day. They fit together with uncomfortable precision, layered, drained, engineered by minds that believed chaos was a solvable problem. These roads were not merely for travel. They were statements. Rome was here. Rome knew what it was doing. Rome would be back in the morning. But morning is no longer guaranteed. Milestones still stand at precise intervals, each one marking distance to places that suddenly feel very far away. Londinium, Eboracum, names carved in Latin letters that glow faintly when torchlight passes over them. The distances are still accurate. That is the cruel part. The measurements remain correct, even when the authority behind them has vanished. It is hard to argue with stone that refuses to admit the world has changed. In the town's bathhouses loom quietly, brick walls rise in disciplined lines, inside tiled floors wait for feet that will not come tonight. The pools are dark, water still, reflecting the ceiling like an unblinking eye. Once, these baths were alive with steam and voices, gossip drifting through warm air. Now they sit silent, immaculate in their emptiness, like machines paused mid-cycle. Rome did not destroy its infrastructure. That would have been dramatic. Rome simply stopped maintaining it. Forts dot the landscape, their walls squared and solid, their gates closed more out of habit than necessity. Inside, barracks echo with absence. Bed frames remain. Storage rooms still smell faintly of oil and iron. Somewhere, a helmet hangs on a peg, perfectly balanced, as if its owner has merely stepped outside for a moment. Rome had always been very good at making things feel permanent, even when they were not. This is what abandonment looks like when done by professionals. Britain has inherited a system that works beautifully, provided someone keeps it working. Roads need repairs, drains need clearing, walls need watchmen, baths need fuel. None of this happens automatically. Rome knew this. Rome paid people to care. And tonight, there is no one officially paid to do anything at all. The locals walk these roads cautiously now, their footsteps softer than usual. They trust the stones, but they no longer trust what the stones imply. Roads once meant safety, movement, connection. Now they feel exposed. Straight lines offer no hiding places. The forest edge seems closer when the empire that cleared it has gone home. There is a faint humor in this, if one is inclined to look for it. Rome has left behind keys, magnificent keys, carved from limestone and brick and mortar, but no instructions. Britain stands in front of locked doors that are technically open, wondering what exactly it is supposed to do next. The empire built a machine and walked away while it was still running. Rome left the keys. It did not leave the manual. Somewhere along a road, a cart passes, its wooden wheels groaning softly. The road does its job perfectly, bearing the weight without complaint. That is the danger of good infrastructure. It convinces people nothing has changed. For now, things still function. Goods still move. People still travel. The illusion holds. But systems are patient. They fail slowly, then all at once. A cracked stone here. A blocked drain there. A missing repair that no one notices because it is too small to matter tonight. Rome used to send engineers for this sort of thing. Rome used to have schedules. Rome used to care. The forts especially feel strange without soldiers. They were designed to project power even when empty, but emptiness lingers too long. A fort without a garrison is not a threat. It is an invitation. The walls are solid, yes, but walls alone do not watch the horizon. Towers are tall, but height means nothing if no one climbs the steps. Britain does not yet understand the cost of maintenance. Rome did. Rome charged taxes, collected grain, enforced order, and reinvested just enough to keep everything from collapsing. Now the ledger is closed. No more payments, no more oversight. The empire has decided the return on investment is insufficient. There is something unsettling about infrastructure outliving authority. Roads without orders, baths without schedules, forts without command. They suggest a world that continues on momentum alone, like a wheel still spinning, long after the hand that pushed it has moved on. At night, the sound of water moving through Roman drains can still be heard beneath the streets. A quiet, efficient trickle, proof that the system still works, for now. But water is patient. It finds cracks, it waits, and without constant attention, even Roman stone learns how to fail. People sense this instinctively. They cannot articulate it, but they feel it in their bones. The structures around them are too big, too complex, too deliberate to belong to anyone they know. Britain has inherited a civilization-sized machine without the people who know which levers not to pull. Rome's genius was never just conquest, it was administration, forms, inspections, repairs done before things broke. That genius does not linger in stone. It requires humans, and humans have gone south. As the night stretches on, the roads remain straight, the forts remain silent, and the baths remain dark. Everything stands exactly as it should, and that is what makes it eerie. Nothing has collapsed. Nothing has burned. There is no visible sign of disaster. Yet, the infrastructure waits, patient and indifferent, for caretakers who will not arrive. Britain walks carefully through a world built for someone else, using tools it did not design, trusting systems it does not yet understand. The empire has left the stage set, the props in place, the lights still warm, but the director has gone home. Those who remained, Romanized, but no longer Roman. As the night continues its slow advance across Britain, attention drifts away from stone and toward flesh. Roads can wait, walls can endure, but people must decide who they are, even when the world refuses to answer. They are still here, the ones Rome did not take with it. Local officials who once carried wax tablets and seals, veterans who earned their citizenship with years of service on damp frontiers, merchants who learned just enough Latin to argue about prices and contracts. Their lives were shaped by Rome so thoroughly that imagining existence without it feels like imagining gravity, suddenly optional. They speak Latin or something close to it. The grammar is imperfect, the accent unmistakably provincial, but the intent is sincere. Latin was the language of power, of legitimacy, of being taken seriously. Tonight it still sounds impressive, yet oddly hollow. Words that once opened doors now echo back unanswered. They wear Roman clothes, or versions of them, tunics stitched in the style of soldiers long gone, belts modeled after official designs. Even hairstyles carry echoes of the empire. Rome taught people how to look important, and habits like that do not disappear overnight. Clothing, after all, is a memory you can wear. These people were never fully Roman in Rome's eyes, but they were Roman enough to collect taxes, enough to enforce laws, enough to feel included in something vast and orderly. Rome had been very good at offering partial belonging. It made people feel important without letting them forget who held the real power. Now that power has evaporated, local administrators sit in buildings that once mattered. Offices still have desks. Scrolls still sit in neat stacks. But no new orders arrive. No messengers knock. Authority without reinforcement is a strange thing. It looks convincing until challenged. And tonight no one challenges it because no one knows what would happen next. A former official might still tell himself he is in charge. He has the title, after all, or at least he remembers having it. But titles are delicate creatures. They survive on recognition. When Rome stops acknowledging them, they begin to fade like ink left too long in sunlight. Veterans feel the shift even more sharply. They gave Rome years of their lives, their bodies, their loyalty. Some earned citizenship, real citizenship, not just promises. They carried that status with pride. It meant something. It placed them above others, even here at the edge of the world. Tonight, that citizenship feels like a document whose issuing office has burned down. Technically valid, practically meaningless. There is a quiet bitterness in this realization. Not rage, not yet. Just a tired sense of being misfiled. Rome had rules, clear paths: serve, obey, endure, and be rewarded. Veterans followed the rules, and now the system that promised to remember them has quietly erased itself. Merchants, meanwhile, feel a different unease. Trade depends on trust, and trust depends on enforcement. Roman coins still circulate, stamped with faces of emperors who may already be dead. The metal is real, the weight is right. But money is a belief system, and beliefs weaken when their gods disappear. Contracts once backed by Roman law now rely on personal reputation. That is a much smaller safety net. A handshake replaces a seal. A promise replaces a threat of punishment. It works for now, but everyone senses the downgrade. The strangest part is that nothing external has forced this change. No invaders, no flames, no proclamation declaring the end of an era. Rome simply stopped participating. And participation, it turns out, was everything. These people stand at an identity crossroads they never expected to face. They were not born Romans, but they became Romanized. They adopted Roman habits, Roman logic, Roman assumptions about how the world works. Rome taught them to expect structure, predictability, a hierarchy that, while unfair, was at least legible. Now the hierarchy has blurred. They ask themselves questions they never needed to ask before. Quiet questions, asked internally, usually late at night when certainty thins. Who am I loyal to? Whose laws apply? What does it mean to be Roman when Rome does not answer back? The irony is gentle but persistent. They are Roman until they are not. Their identity exists in a space that requires external validation, and the validating authority has left the building. They are Roman until no one recognizes them as such. There is faint humor in this. though it is the kind that makes one exhale through the nose rather than laugh. An empire capable of reorganizing entire continents has managed to strand its own cultural offspring in a bureaucratic limbo. Some cling harder to Roman identity tonight. They insist on rituals, on language, on procedure. If they perform Romanness well enough, perhaps it will remain real. Perhaps the empire will notice and return. This is not entirely foolish. Rome has left before, briefly. Britain has learned to wait. Others feel something loosening, a subtle release. Being Roman required effort, taxes, obligations, discipline. Without oversight, the rules feel optional. The weight of Rome lifts just enough to tempt experimentation. Who says authority must look like that? Who says power must speak Latin? This thought is dangerous, though no one would phrase it that way yet. Families discuss these matters quietly, if at all. Identity is not a topic for loud debate when the night feels this uncertain. Instead, it surfaces indirectly, in which language a parent scolds a child, in which gods receive a whispered prayer, in which stories feel comforting, and which suddenly feel outdated. Children especially notice the change without fully understanding it. They have grown up Romanized, assuming the world naturally organizes itself into forts and roads and rules. Tonight, they sense that adults are less confident, less sure. That certainty, once borrowed from Rome, no longer flows automatically. Former soldiers struggle most with the silence. Armies thrive on orders, on clarity, on knowing where one stands. Without Rome, their skills feel oddly misplaced. Discipline without command becomes rigidity. Loyalty without direction becomes nostalgia. Some veterans will eventually sell their armor. Others will keep it polished long after it stops being useful. Objects, after all, remember identities long after people begin to doubt them. There is a subtle danger here that no one names. When people lose a shared identity, they begin inventing smaller ones. Tribal ones, local ones, personal ones. Rome unified by force and habit. Without it, unity must be renegotiated from scratch. Tonight, that process has not begun openly. It is still too early, too quiet. But the seeds are there, resting beneath the surface like stones waiting to be uncovered. The people who remain in Britain are not lost. Not yet. But they are unmoored. They live in buildings designed for a system that no longer acknowledges them. They follow rules that lack enforcement. They speak a language whose authority has faded with distance. Rome once defined who mattered, who had rights, who belonged. Tonight, those definitions blur, and Britain begins the long, uncomfortable task of redefining itself, not through declarations, but through lived experience. No one announces the end of Roman Britain. No one needs to. It ends quietly in moments like this, when a former official realizes his seal means nothing, when a veteran understands his service will not be remembered, when a merchant senses that trust has become personal rather than institutional. They are still Roman in habit, Roman in memory, Roman in posture. But Rome is no longer listening. An identity without an audience becomes a question rather than an answer. A night without law and the terrifying sense of emptiness. As the night stretches deeper into Britain, something intangible slips away. Not buildings, not people, not even identity. What fades now is structure, the invisible framework that once told everyone what would happen next. Law does not vanish with a crash. It does not shatter like glass or burn like wood. Law disappears the way sound does when a room empties. Gradually, quietly, almost politely. And by the time you notice the silence, it has already settled in. Tonight there are no official tax collectors counting grain or livestock, no scribes recording debts, no magistrates reviewing disputes beneath flickering lamps. No orders arrive, not because they were revoked, but because there is no longer a sender. The administrative heartbeat that once pulsed steadily through Roman Britain has stopped, not abruptly, but without replacement. The remarkable thing is how little changes at first. People still follow rules. They stop where they always stopped. They speak carefully. They avoid obvious wrongdoing. Habit is powerful, and Rome trained its provinces well. Order, after all, is easiest to maintain, right after authority leaves. The memory of consequences lingers longer than consequences themselves. But memory fades. Law in practice is not a set of words carved in stone. It is repetition, enforcement, expectation. And tonight, expectation begins to wobble. No one announces the taxes are no longer collected. They simply are not. No one declares courts closed. They just do not open. No one forbids justice. It simply has nowhere to report for duty. This is not chaos. That comes later if it comes at all. This is something quieter and more unsettling. Ambiguity. A man argues with his neighbor over land boundaries, a dispute that would once have been settled by Roman surveyors and records. Tonight the argument ends unresolved, not because either side yields, but because neither knows who could decide. Voices lower, tempers cool, not out of peace but uncertainty. A merchant wonders whether a debt still applies. The law says yes. The enforcement says nothing. He decides to wait. Waiting becomes a strategy. A minor theft occurs, nothing dramatic, a missing tool. Normally this would lead to a report, a fine, perhaps a punishment. Tonight the victim shrugs and secures his door more carefully. Justice feels optional, and optional things are easily postponed. The absence of law does not announce itself as danger. It feels like inconvenience, like bureaucracy on pause, like a holiday no one scheduled. There is no panic because panic requires clarity. Panic needs an obvious threat. What Britain experiences instead is confusion, and confusion drains energy slowly, the way cold does, until you realize too late how tired you are. Officials who once enforced Roman law find themselves hesitating. Do they still have authority? Technically, yes. Practically, maybe. Authority, after all, is a performance that requires an audience. Without backing, enforcement becomes personal. And personal enforcement invites retaliation. So they wait. Everyone waits. The night fills with small decisions left unmade, a punishment delayed, a rule not enforced, a duty quietly skipped. None of these choices feel revolutionary. They feel reasonable, sensible even. Rome is gone after all. Why rush? This is how systems dissolve. Not through rebellion, but through hesitation. The strangest part is how calm it all feels. Fires burn steadily. Conversations remain hushed. Children sleep. Dogs curl near doorways. There are no screams, no alarms. The world has not ended. It has simply stopped giving clear instructions. Late at night, this kind of silence feels heavier than noise. It presses inward. It forces people to listen to their own thoughts, and that is rarely comfortable. Somewhere, a former magistrate sits awake, staring at his hands. They look the same, capable, experienced. But without Rome, his role feels theatrical. He could declare a judgment tomorrow. He might even enforce it. But would anyone support him if challenged? Would anyone care? Law depends on belief, and belief depends on shared certainty. Tonight, certainty has slipped out the door without explanation. There is a faint, almost dark humor to this moment. An empire that prided itself on regulation, documentation, and procedure has left behind a legal vacuum without issuing so much as a closing memo. No final guidelines, no transitional authority, just silence. Rome governed with impressive complexity, but it exited with remarkable simplicity. It stopped responding. It is not chaos. It is simply that no one answers anymore. People test this absence cautiously, not deliberately, not maliciously, just small experiments. What happens if I ignore this rule? What happens if I delay that obligation? Nothing happens, not immediately. And that realization spreads quietly, like a secret no one wants to say out loud. Yet, for now, social pressure fills the gap. Reputation matters more. Community memory replaces legal record. People behave not because the law demands it, but because their neighbors are watching. This works briefly, but it is fragile. Social order without enforcement is a tightrope, and everyone knows it. The night stretches on, and with it comes a subtle shift in responsibility. Without Rome, decisions return to individuals. That sounds empowering. It is not. Responsibility without authority is exhausting. It forces people to weigh risks they once outsourced to the state. Do I intervene? Do I ignore? Do I punish? Do I forgive? Rome once answered these questions. Now Britain must answer them itself, one awkward moment at a time. This is the most dangerous phase of any collapse, not the fall, but the pause. The moment when the old rules still exist in memory and the new rules have not yet formed. People live between systems, unsure which behaviors will be rewarded and which punished. The law has not been repealed, it has been abandoned. And abandonment leaves room for creativity, for negotiation, and eventually for conflict. But tonight, there is only the pause. Britain does not descend into violence, not yet. It simply drifts, untethered, guided by habit rather than command. The empire's shadow still looms, long enough to keep everyone cautious. The unsettling truth is this: order is not maintained by walls, or roads, or even soldiers alone. It is maintained by expectation. And expectation requires continuity. Rome broke that continuity without warning. As the night deepens, Britain remains intact, peaceful, almost serene. But beneath that calm lies a growing awareness that tomorrow will require choices no one has practiced making alone. The silence of the law is not loud enough to frighten anyone yet. It will be. Beyond the torchlight, Saxons, Picts, and rumors in the wind. The night outside Britain does not feel empty. It feels occupied. Beyond the reach of Torchlight, beyond the last straight line of Roman road, the land breathes differently. Forests thicken, marshes widen, hills rise without explanation. And in those places where Rome never fully convinced the world to behave, people have been watching. Not armies, not yet, just eyes. The Picts to the north, beyond the old frontier walls, have always been there. Rome never truly conquered them. It merely negotiated their distance. Occasional raids, familiar patterns, predictable threats. The kind of danger that can be managed with enough soldiers and enough pay. Rome understood this relationship well. It was stable precisely because it was hostile. To the west, the Irish Sea remains restless, carrying stories faster than ships. Raids happen sometimes, not invasions, interruptions. Rome accounted for those too. And to the east, across the water, the Saxons wait. That word, wait, matters. They are not attacking tonight. They are not even moving in any organized way, but they are aware. Traders talk, sailors whisper. Borders, after all, are loud places. Information leaks. And Rome's absence is not subtle to those who know how to look. Britain feels watched now in a way it did not yesterday. This is not fear in the usual sense. No horns sound. No flames rise on the horizon. There are no scouts sprinting back with bad news. Instead, there is anticipation. A low, constant awareness that the balance has shifted. Rome's greatest contribution to Britain was not civilization, despite what it liked to claim. It was predictability. Rome made threats legible. It told everyone where the lines were and what happened if you crossed them. Peace existed not because no one wanted violence, but because violence had consequences. Tonight, those consequences feel negotiable. Rumors begin their slow work. A traveler mentions unusual movement near the coast. A fisherman swears he saw unfamiliar sails at dusk. A shepherd insists the northern hills were quieter than they should be, and silence, in borderlands, is rarely comforting. No one can verify these stories. That is what gives them power. In a Roman world, rumors would be investigated, reports filed, patrols dispatched. Tonight, rumors drift freely, unchallenged, accumulating weight simply by being repeated. Fear grows best in environments without official denial. Britain realizes something uncomfortable. Peace was never natural. It was enforced, maintained, guarded by men who stood watch while others slept. And now, no one is standing watch. Rome brought peace and took it with them at the same time. There is mild irony in this, almost enough to smile at, if smiling felt appropriate. Rome advertised itself as the end of chaos. In truth, it was chaos with very strict scheduling. Remove the schedule, and chaos remembers how to improvise. Still, nothing happens. That is the most unsettling part. The Picts do not descend in the night. Saxon ships do not land on the beaches. The Irish do not raid. The world remains stubbornly quiet, as if holding its breath. This quiet is deceptive. It forces Britain to imagine threats rather than respond to them. Imagined danger often feels worse than real danger because it has no shape, no timeline, no clear solution. In the absence of Roman patrols, villages rely on their own vigilance. Torches are lit earlier, fires burn brighter, People listen more carefully to sounds they once ignored. A snapping branch becomes a question. A distant howl becomes a possibility. Children sense the tension even if they do not understand it. Adults speak more softly. Stories told by the fire grow darker, drifting toward cautionary tales instead of heroic ones. Monsters return to folklore when borders weaken. Former soldiers feel this acutely. They know what silence before violence feels like. They have lived in it. They recognize the pattern. Calm that precedes movement. Peace that exists only because no one has decided otherwise yet. But without command, even veterans hesitate to act. Who organizes defense now? Who decides when a rumor becomes a threat? Acting too soon risks panic. Acting too late risks disaster. So Britain waits. This waiting marks a psychological shift. Rome once absorbed uncertainty on behalf of its provinces. Threats existed, but they were Rome's responsibility. Now responsibility leaks outward, settling onto individual communities like an unwanted inheritance. The knowledge spreads quietly. If danger comes, no legions will arrive. No reinforcements will sail in at dawn. Britain will face whatever happens alone. This realization does not produce immediate terror. It produces calculation. Villages consider their locations. Coastal settlements feel suddenly exposed. Inland towns feel slightly safer, though not enough to relax. Old forts, once symbols of Roman dominance, become potential refugees if someone decides to occupy them. That decision has not been made yet. Outside Britain, word travels faster than armies. Saxon leaders hear of Roman withdrawal long before they commit to action. To them, this is not an invitation, but an opportunity to evaluate. Is Britain weak or merely unsupervised? Rome's departure creates uncertainty on both sides of the border. Attack too soon and Britain might still rally. Wait too long and someone else might claim the prize. So everyone watches. This mutual hesitation creates a strange equilibrium. Peace persists, not because it is guaranteed, but because no one wants to move first without certainty. Britain exists in a liminal space, no longer protected, not yet threatened. That in-between state is exhausting. People sleep lightly. Dreams fill with vague danger rather than specific images. The mind searches for patterns where none are visible. Every distant sound becomes a potential signal, and yet the night remains intact. This is how fear matures, slowly, without spectacle. It seeps into routine, alters behavior, rewrites priorities. People do not flee, they prepare. Men discuss weapons that have been neglected. Spears are checked, shields examined. Not in a hurry, just in case. Preparation feels reasonable, even calming. It provides an illusion of control. Women quietly adjust storage, counting supplies with new seriousness. Food has always mattered, but now it feels strategic. Winter will come whether Rome is here or not. Leadership begins to shift subtly. Those who speak confidently gain attention. Those with experience command respect. Authority reforms not by decree, but by necessity. Rome once centralized fear and handled it professionally. Britain must now distribute fear across its population and hope competence emerges organically. This is not a reassuring process. Outside the Torchlight, the land remains unchanged. Trees do not care about empires. Rivers do not pause for political transitions. Nature continues indifferently, providing no commentary on human anxiety. The unsettling truth is that Britain has always existed in a dangerous world. Rome did not eliminate that danger, it managed it. And management, it turns out, was the real luxury. Tonight, Britain is reminded of this fact, not through violence, but through awareness. The absence of attack becomes its own kind of pressure. Every peaceful moment feels borrowed, temporary. The future presses in, undefined and unnegotiated. No one knows when the first real threat will arrive. Tomorrow, next year, a generation from now. That uncertainty stretches the mind thin. As the night wears on, people do what humans always do when faced with vague danger. They imagine worst-case scenarios and hope reality will be kinder. Rome once stood between Britain and those scenarios. Now there is only darkness, rumor, and the uncomfortable realization that peace was never a given. It was guarded, and the guards have gone home. A British family on that night. History does not knock loudly on this house. It does not announce itself with banners or speeches. It slips in through the cracks around the door, settles near the hearth, and listens. The house is small, built of timber and stone, Roman in influence but local in execution. Not a villa, not a hut, something in between. The kind of place that exists only in provinces. The fire burns low, not out of scarcity but habit. Wood is precious. Winter is patient. The father sits closest to the hearth. His name does not matter, it never will. What matters is what he used to be. Once he wore Roman armor, not the polished kind meant for parades, but the practical kind, scratched and repaired, meant for standing in rain and mud. He served Rome long enough to learn its rhythms, long enough to trust its systems, long enough to believe that someone, somewhere, always knew what was happening. That belief sits uneasily with him tonight. He no longer wears the armor. It hangs nearby, oiled, maintained out of habit rather than expectation. Armor has weight. Responsibility does too. He carries both in memory. Across from him sits his wife, moving carefully as she portions food. She knows how much grain remains. She always has. Trade taught her that stability is not a feeling. It is arithmetic. Prices, measures, agreements honored on time. Rome made trade predictable. Coins meant something. Routes stayed open. Buyers returned. Tonight she serves smaller portions without comment. Their children sit between them, close enough to the fire to feel safe. They were born into peace. Roman peace. Roads always open. Markets always functioning. Soldiers always present, even if rarely noticed. To them, the world has always worked. Children are excellent observers and terrible analysts. They sense tension without understanding it. They notice the pauses in conversation, the way their parents listen before speaking, the way the night outside feels closer than usual. "Why are you quiet?" one of them asks, not accusing, just curious. The father considers his answer longer than necessary. He has explained patrol schedules and borders before. He has explained why soldiers exist, but explaining absence is harder than explaining presence. "Just thinking," he says finally. It is true enough. The mother glances at him. They share a look full of unsaid calculations. Winter, supplies, the road, who comes if trouble comes. They talk about practical things, the roof, a crack that will need attention, the neighbor's fence, whether it will hold if repaired or if it needs rebuilding. These conversations have always existed, but tonight they carry more weight. Practical decisions feel strategic now. The children chew quietly. Food tastes the same. That is comforting. Outside, the wind moves through the trees. Not threatening, just present. The father listens to it automatically, the way soldiers do. He notes direction, strength, rhythm. Old habits survive even when empires do not. He thinks about the forts, about how empty they must feel now. He spent years trusting that emptiness never lasted long. There was always another shift, another unit, another order. Now there is just night. The mother breaks the silence again carefully. If the road slows, she begins, then stops. She does not need to finish the sentence. They both understand. Trade depends on safety. Safety depends on enforcement. Enforcement has become a local problem. If it slows, we adapt, he says. The words sound confident. They are not untrue. But confidence now requires effort. They do not talk about Rome directly. Talking about it feels unnecessary, almost indulgent. Rome has become a background fact, like weather. You cannot argue with it, you only respond. The children ask about stories. They always want stories at night. Stories are how children process uncertainty. Tonight's story is an old one, not heroic, not violent. Something familiar. Familiarity is its own defense. As the father speaks, he realizes how much of his vocabulary comes from Rome. Terms for time, for duty, for order. He wonders what his children will inherit. Language shapes thought. If Latin fades, what replaces it? He does not know. He files the question away with many others. The mother watches the fire as he talks. Flames flicker unpredictably, responding to air currents no one can see. She thinks about markets she once trusted completely, prices set by custom, enforced by authority. Now every exchange will require judgment. Trust, risk. She has always been good at risk. Tonight she feels it more clearly. When the story ends, the children do not rush to sleep. They linger as if delaying will hold the night at bay. Eventually they lie down, close enough to hear their parents breathe. The house grows quieter, not silent, just focused inward. The parents speak more freely now, but still softly. Walls are thin, and even if no one is listening, privacy feels fragile tonight. "Do you think they'll come?" she asks. "Who?" he asks, though he knows. "Anyone." He considers. He has spent his life estimating threats, evaluating intentions. He knows better than to answer too quickly. "Not tonight," he says. "Probably not soon." That is not reassurance. It is assessment. She nods. It is enough. For now. They talk about moving closer to others if needed, about old contacts, about the fort nearby, whether it could be useful, whether it would attract attention. Forts protect, but they also advertise. Every option carries risk. Rome used to calculate those risks centrally. Now they must do it themselves. There is a strange intimacy in this moment, not romantic but real. Shared uncertainty binds people more honestly than shared comfort ever did. They are not discussing history, they are negotiating survival. The father thinks about identity again. about being Roman, about serving an empire that no longer serves back. He does not feel anger, he feels tired. He wonders whether his children will remember Rome as something real or something half mythical, a time when things worked better, or at least felt like they did. The mother wonders whether stability can be rebuilt locally, smaller, less impressive, but closer. Empires promise order from afar. Families build it close to home. Outside, the night remains quiet. That quiet presses against the house, testing it gently like fingers on glass. Inside, the fire burns steadily. They do not know they are living through a turning point. They do not know historians will name this period, debate it, argue about when exactly it began. They know only that tomorrow will require work, attention, and caution, and that winter is coming. The father finally lies down. Sleep does not come immediately. His mind keeps returning to patterns, defense lines, supply chains, responsibilities. He has been trained to expect orders. The absence of them leaves a hollow space that thought keeps circling. Beside him, the mother sleeps lightly. Her mind runs numbers even in rest. The children dream. Their dreams are not of invasion or collapse. They dream of roads and stories and warmth. The world has not yet taught them otherwise. History, if it could speak, would find this scene unremarkable. No declarations, no battles, just a family managing uncertainty with quiet competence. And that is the truth history often hides. Empires do not end in palaces alone. They end in kitchens, in lowered voices, in portioned meals, in conversations about fences and whether the road will still be safe next month. History happens in kitchens, not on maps. This family will survive tonight. Probably many more. They will adapt. People always do. They will build smaller systems where larger ones failed. They will learn which neighbors to trust, which routes to avoid, which stories to tell their children. Rome will fade gradually in this house, not erased, but softened. A reference point rather than a rule. And long after the empire is gone, the fire will still burn. Gods, Christ, and prayers in an uncertain night. As the fire in the house burns lower and sleep comes unevenly, something else stirs across Britain, quietly, privately, and with remarkable persistence. When power withdraws, belief steps forward, not to replace it, but to fill the silence it leaves behind. Tonight, the gods are busy. Somewhere not far from the family's house, a small wooden shrine still stands at the edge of a field. It has been there longer than Rome, longer than Latin words carved in stone. Its surface is worn smooth by hands that no longer remember the names of those who first placed it there. A simple thing. No grandeur, no theology, just an understanding, older than empires, that the world is dangerous and attention must be paid to unseen forces. Further down the road, in a modest building that once served as a storage hall, a small group gathers quietly. No incense, no statues, just whispered words and a shared belief that suffering has meaning, and that history bends towards something beyond human control. Christianity has arrived in Britain gently, without conquest, without spectacle. It spreads the way ideas do when they are useful to the anxious. Rome once tolerated many gods. It added them to its collection the way it added provinces, practically. Worship was administrative. Sacrifice was transactional. Pray correctly, perform the ritual, receive favor. Religion functioned because the empire functioned. Now the empire does not function. And so belief begins to drift, free of structure. The old gods do not disappear when Rome leaves. They never depended on Rome in the first place. Forest spirits, river gods, household protectors, these were local, personal, stubbornly resilient. They do not care about emperors or legions. They care about weather, crops, health, and survival. Their jurisdiction remains intact. Christianity, on the other hand, offers something new, not protection from uncertainty, but meaning within it. It does not promise that Rome will return or that borders will hold. It promises that suffering is not random, that history is not accidental, and that there is an order higher than imperial schedules. That is an attractive offer on a night like this. People do not choose between gods the way they choose between laws. They accumulate them, hedge their bets. A prayer to Christ does not prevent a quiet offering to an older power. Belief, in uncertain times, becomes layered rather than exclusive. Someone whispers a prayer learned recently, awkwardly, unsure of pronunciation but sincere in intention. Somewhere else, a familiar invocation is spoken, passed down through generations without written record. Neither feels contradictory. Both feel necessary. This is not religious conflict. It is religious multitasking. Rome once provided answers, imperfect but official ones. When Rome leaves, questions proliferate. Why now? Why here? What comes next? Belief rushes in to answer what power no longer addresses. The humor, faint and almost apologetic, lies in the image of it all. An empire withdraws, and suddenly everyone remembers their gods. It is as if divine attention spikes precisely when administrative oversight drops. Perhaps that night all the gods were a little busy. Christian leaders, few, scattered, cautious, do not yet claim dominance. They do not have the numbers or the authority. But they have something else. A narrative that thrives in uncertainty. The idea that earthly power is temporary, that empires rise and fall according to a plan beyond human comprehension. This is not comforting in the immediate sense. It does not fix roads or feed families, but it reframes loss. Rome's departure becomes not a failure, but a phase, a test, a step towards something unseen. For people raised on Roman order, this is a subtle but profound shift. Rome taught them to trust systems. Christianity asks them to trust purpose. Old beliefs, meanwhile, offer familiarity. They do not explain Rome's departure. They do not need to. They focus on continuity, seasons, cycles, balance. The world has always been dangerous. Gods have always been negotiated with. Empires are merely recent complications. Around hearths and altars, prayers rise tonight with unusual frequency. Not dramatic pleas, not desperation, just a quiet recalibration. People sense they need help, but they are not sure who is listening. The absence of Rome removes a layer of certainty that once insulated belief. When everything works, gods feel optional. When systems falter, belief feels practical again. This is not faith as rebellion. It is faith as adaptation. In some households, prayers are whispered for protection from invaders who have not yet appeared. In others, prayers are for clarity, for guidance, for the wisdom to choose correctly when no authority remains. In still others, belief expresses itself wordlessly through habit, ritual, or simple acknowledgement that some things are beyond control. The church buildings are small, the shrines are humble, the faith is quiet. Nothing here suggests religious dominance or crusade. That will come later, carried by different forces. Tonight is about reassurance, not conquest. The irony is that Rome once tried to regulate belief, to standardize worship the way it standardized roads. It succeeded only partially. Faith does not scale well. It thrives in cracks, in private spaces, in moments like this, when the night feels too large. People do not abandon old gods easily. They have history together, shared rituals, stories that fit the land. Christianity, however, fits the moment. It speaks directly to loss, to endurance, to the idea that collapse is not meaningless. These beliefs coexist uneasily, but coexist they do. Britain, like its people, becomes layered. Roman in habit, local in practice, and cautiously open to something new. No one tonight claims certainty. That is the defining feature of belief in this moment. Faith is not confident. It is hopeful, and hope does not require proof. Somewhere, a Christian prayer ends with a promise of salvation. Somewhere else, a traditional offering ends with a request for good weather. Both are acts of control in a world that feels increasingly uncontrollable. The gods, old and new, do not answer audibly. They rarely do. But the act of praying changes something in the people who pray. It gives shape to fear, direction to uncertainty. That may be enough. The empire once stood between humans and chaos. Now belief negotiates that boundary, not as efficiently, not as reliably, but more intimately. As the night moves on, candles burn down, shrines receive their offerings, prayers fade into silence. Nothing miraculous happens. No signs appear in the sky. The gods do not issue instructions, and yet something has shifted. People feel less alone with their fear. That matters. Rome managed the world through power. Faith manages it through meaning. Britain, stripped of the former, experiments cautiously with the latter. Tomorrow roads will still crack. Laws will still hesitate. Rumors will still spread. Belief will not stop any of that. But tonight, in the absence of answers, people have spoken anyway. And sometimes speaking into the darkness is enough to keep it from closing in. The things that will disappear, though they do not know it yet, if this night could be watched from above, quietly, without interfering, it would look deceptively complete. Fires burn, roads lie still, people sleep or pray or think. Nothing appears broken beyond repair. And that is the tragedy of it, because this is the last night many things exist without knowing they are already fading. Coins still change hands. Real coins. Heavy, stamped, official. Faces of emperors stare upward in firelight, their expressions frozen in authority. These coins have weight, both literal and symbolic. They represent trust. They represent distance made manageable. They represent the idea that value can be carried from one place to another and remain value. Tonight, no one questions them. Tomorrow, perhaps not either. But one day, slowly, unevenly, they will stop circulating. Not because someone bans them, but because no one replaces them. Metal will thin out. Coins will be hoarded, melted, repurposed. Trade will remember weight long after it forgets faces. But tonight, a coin still buys bread. And so no one suspects. Writing still exists. Letters scratched into wax, ink on parchment, official records stored in rooms built for permanence. Literacy, though never widespread, still matters. Documents still feel authoritative. Names still feel permanent when written down. People assume this will continue. They do not know that writing depends on institutions, on schools, on clerks, on reasons to record more than memory requires. When administration dissolves, literacy becomes a luxury rather than a necessity. Not immediately, gradually, quietly. Tonight, someone writes something mundane, a debt, a note, a name. They believe it will be readable later. It might not be. The bathhouses still stand, clean, impressive, Roman in every detail. Heated floors, tiled walls, water systems that function without complaint. Bathing is still a habit, still a pleasure, still a sign of civilization. But bathhouses require fuel, maintenance, knowledge. Someone must care. When care becomes optional, so does bathing. Commerce still works more or less. Routes exist. Markets open, goods move. Rome designed Britain to be connected to itself and to the wider world. That design still holds, for now. Trade, however, is a fragile thing. It depends on trust, enforcement, and predictability. Remove enough of those and trade contracts inward. It becomes local, then personal, then occasional. Tonight, merchants assume tomorrow will resemble yesterday. Why wouldn't it? Nothing has changed enough to justify alarm. That is how endings work. They rarely announce themselves. From the perspective of the future, from the vantage point of someone who knows what comes next, this night glows with a strange irony. People are using systems that will not outlive them. They are relying on structures already past their peak. They are living in the final chapter. Without knowing, it is the final chapter. The tragedy is not loss itself. Loss is manageable. Humans are excellent at adapting. The tragedy is the gap between perception and reality, the way continuity disguises collapse. No one wakes tomorrow and declares the end of Roman Britain. No single event marks the transition. Instead, there will be many small absences. A bathhouse that closes for repairs and never reopens. A road that erodes just enough to discourage travel. A document that goes unread because no one remembers how. None of these moments feel significant alone. Together, they erase a world. The people of this night still believe in normalcy. That belief is not foolish. It is reasonable. History does not train people to expect eras to end quietly. We are taught to look for signs, wars, disasters, declarations. This night offers none of those. Children sleep expecting to grow up in a world that looks like this one. Adults plan months ahead, not decades. Why wouldn't they? Rome has always been there. And even now its absence does not feel permanent. That feeling will linger for years. The most unsettling aspect is how long the illusion holds. Roman systems will continue to function on momentum alone. Roads will remain usable. Coins will remain valid. Buildings will remain standing. Memory will do the work of institutions for a time. And then, gradually, memory will tire. When literacy declines, it will not feel like decline. It will feel like simplification. Why write something everyone already knows? Why preserve records no one consults? Practicality will wear down permanence. When trade narrows, it will not feel like collapse. It will feel like adjustment. Fewer routes, fewer partners, less risk. When bathhouses close, it will not feel like loss. It will feel like inconvenience. Cold water is manageable. Warmth can be found elsewhere. Civilization does not vanish. It contracts. From the future, it will be tempting to describe what follows as darkness. That word is misleading. Darkness suggests sudden absence of light. What Britain experiences instead is dusk stretched across generations. Tonight is bright enough to hide that fact. The narrator, watching from beyond time, knows that some skills will be forgotten, some technologies abandoned, some comforts reclassified as unnecessary. Not because people are incapable, but because complexity requires stability, and stability has left the building. The irony is gentle but relentless. Rome prided itself on endurance. Its legacy will endure in stone long after its systems fail. Roads will outlast administration, walls will outlast command. But stone does not teach, repair, or remember. People assume the future will inherit the present intact. That assumption feels safe, comforting. It is also wrong. Tonight, Britain lives at the height of what it will soon lose, not because it is perfect, but because it is integrated, connected, supported by systems larger than any individual. Those systems are already unraveling. No one tonight imagines that centuries later, historians will argue about when exactly this unraveling began. No one imagines the phrase post-Roman being applied to their lives. They imagine continuity. History rarely corrects that expectation gently. Still, it would be unfair to call this night ignorant. It is simply human. Humans live forward. Understanding trails behind. People trust that tomorrow will bring work, conversation, routine, and it will. For a while. Enough time to make the loss subtle. From the future, this night feels fragile in retrospect. From within it, it feels ordinary. And that is the cruelest part. They are not witnessing collapse. They are witnessing normalcy at the edge of expiration. The systems they rely on will not vanish tomorrow, or next year, or even in a single lifetime. They will fade unevenly, leaving behind questions that no one remembers how to answer. But tonight, belief in continuity is still intact. And so people sleep, confident that morning will arrive carrying the same world they left behind. It will not all of it. Dawn will come, but it will no longer be Roman. The night does not last forever. It never does. Even the longest, quietest, most uncertain nights eventually loosen their grip and allow a thin line of light to appear at the edge of the world. Dawn will come to Britain. This matters because collapse, despite how it is often imagined, does not arrive all at once. There is no single morning when people wake up and discover civilization missing. No dramatic before and after moment. Instead, there is continuity, persistence, the stubborn refusal of life to stop simply because An empire has left. Britain does not fall when Rome leaves. It continues. People rise from sleep. Fires are stirred back to life. Animals are fed. Children complain. Work begins. The rhythms of daily life resume with reassuring familiarity. Roads are still walked. Fields are still tended. Words are still spoken in accents shaped by Rome. If someone were to look only at the morning after this night, they might wonder what all the concern was about. This is the first truth of the post-Roman world. Survival is not dramatic. It is procedural. Britain does not descend into immediate chaos because chaos requires momentum. It requires active disruption. What Britain experiences instead is a slow reorientation. Life keeps moving forward, but without the distant hand that once guided its direction. The phrase "Dark Ages" will one day be used to describe what follows. It is an unfortunate phrase, misleading, loaded. It suggests ignorance, regression, and cultural emptiness. In reality, the darkness is not one of intellect, but of illumination. Fewer records, fewer written voices, less documentation. People do not become less intelligent when Rome leaves. They become less recorded. Knowledge does not vanish. It migrates from parchment to memory, from institutions to individuals, from centralized systems to local practice. Skills are passed orally, traditions adapt, solutions become practical rather than elegant. This is not decay, it is transformation. Britain's future will be quieter, less symmetrical, less confident. It will also be more local, more personal, less concerned with pleasing distant authorities, and more focused on immediate survival. Rome built for eternity. Britain will build for weather. In the absence of imperial infrastructure, communities become laboratories. Some will fail, others will succeed unexpectedly. Leadership will emerge not from titles, but from competence, from trust, from the ability to solve problems without instructions. This process will be uneven, painful at times, but not hopeless. The dawn light reveals landscapes unchanged by politics. Hills remain hills. Rivers flow as they always have. The land does not mourn Rome. It simply waits for the next arrangement of humans to pass across it. That arrangement will take centuries to fully form. What follows this night is not a void, but a long transitional morning, a time when Britain experiments with itself, when old Roman habits linger alongside older native traditions and newer influences yet to arrive. The absence of Rome creates space. Space is dangerous, but it is also creative. Without Rome, Britain will eventually develop new forms of authority. Kingship will look different. Law will be more personal, more negotiated. Religion will grow more influential as a unifying narrative. Communities will shrink and then slowly reconnect in new ways. Trade will return, but along different routes. Writing will return, but in different languages. Architecture will return, but with different priorities. None of this is visible yet. Dawn only reveals the immediate. People do not greet the morning thinking, "We are entering a new era." They think about breakfast, about work, about whether the weather will hold. That ordinariness is not a failure of imagination. It is the foundation of continuity. History often privileges moments of rupture, but endurance is quieter. less impressive, far more common. Britain's path forward will not be Roman. That is certain. But it will be something else, something shaped by necessity rather than ambition. The Roman idea of order was vertical. Authority flowed downward from emperor to province to village. What replaces it will be horizontal. Authority negotiated among neighbors. Power justified by usefulness rather than decree. This will make Britain more vulnerable in some ways, less coordinated, less predictable. It will also make it resilient in ways Rome never was. Local systems break locally. They adapt quickly. They do not depend on distant capitals. From the future, it will be tempting to judge this transition harshly, to see only what was lost. Stone baths replaced by wooden tubs. Coinage replaced by barter. Literacy narrowed. But that judgment misunderstands the trade being made. Complexity requires stability. When stability leaves, complexity sheds weight. What remains is not lesser, just lighter. The dawn light touches Roman ruins and new homes alike. It does not distinguish between them. Time will. Children grow up not knowing Rome personally. It becomes a story told by elders, a reference point, a before. Before things changed, before the roads cracked, before the soldiers left. That memory will soften over time. Rome will become legendary, then symbolic, then distant. Britain will not mourn Rome forever. It will outgrow it. This does not mean Britain will thrive immediately. Hard years will come. Violence will come. Loss will come. But collapse is not destiny. Change is. The Dark Ages are not dark because people forgot how to think. They are dark because fewer people wrote things down for us to read later. Life was lived intensely, locally, without an audience. History dislikes periods without documentation because they resist narration. They refuse to explain themselves. This dawn marks the beginning of such a period, a time when Britain exists more than it records, when meaning is created in action rather than text, when survival outranks legacy. From within this moment, there is no sense of entering darkness. Only the awareness that things are different now, less certain, less supervised, but also less constrained. The empire is gone. That loss will echo for generations. But it does not end the story. It changes the genre. What follows is not an epilogue. It is a new chapter written slowly, unevenly, by people who do not know they are being read. Dawn comes, Britain wakes, and Rome quietly recedes into memory. An ending. A very quiet night. A very large change. The night, now fully spent, leaves behind no ruins, no smoke, no echoes of battle, just the ordinary marks of human presence, footprints in dirt, ashes in hearths, doors opening to a familiar morning. If history were judged only by sound, this moment would not qualify. Nothing crashed, nothing burned, nothing announced itself. And yet something irreversible has already happened. This is the part history struggles to dramatize. There is no villain, no hero, no single decision that can be isolated and blamed. The Roman Empire in Britain does not end with a scream. It ends with a pause that lasts too long, followed by a silence no one knows how to fill. Empires prefer grand finales. They build monuments to beginnings and expect symmetry at the end. Reality rarely cooperates. Power erodes not when it is challenged, but when it is no longer exercised. When authority stops arriving on time. When orders stop coming. When everyone assumes someone else is still in charge. This night is that assumption stretched thin. The people who lived through it will not mark it as special. No calendar will note it. No chronicler will sit by candlelight and write, "This is when it ended." They are too busy living, too focused on the next meal, the next repair, the next winter. History, in its most influential moments, is often deeply unremarkable. The roads remain. The walls remain. The memory of Rome remains. But the habit of Rome, the daily reinforcement of order, payment, consequence, that habit is gone. And habits, more than ideas, are what sustain empires. There is a quiet irony in how gently it all fades. Rome mastered force, logistics, administration. It knew how to conquer territory and how to govern it. What it never truly mastered was how to leave without unraveling what it built. No exit strategy survives reality. This ending is not tragic in the theatrical sense. It is unsettling precisely because it feels so calm. The world continues to function just well enough to mask the loss of its scaffolding. People adapt, not realizing they are compensating for something that used to exist. Later generations will argue about dates, about causes, about responsibility. They will point to invasions, economics, internal decay. All of those explanations will contain truth. None of them will capture the feeling of this night, because the truth is simpler and harder to narrate. The empire ended because it stopped showing up. There is something almost gently mocking about that. An empire that reshaped continents, that moved armies across oceans, that standardized time and space, reduced not by catastrophe but by absence. The humor, if one can call it that, lies in the mismatch between scale and conclusion. Centuries of control undone not by rebellion but by silence. If this story feels uncomfortably familiar, it is because it should. Systems rarely collapse in the way we expect. They linger, they delay, they fade while everyone waits for a moment dramatic enough to justify action. This night offers no such moment. The people of Britain will carry on. They will build lives in the space Rome left behind. Some will thrive, some will suffer, most will simply endure. History will later impose labels, post-Roman, early medieval, Dark Ages, but those labels are for observers, not participants. For those who lived it, this was not an age. It was just life. The unsettling lesson of this night is not about Rome. It is about continuity, about how much of the world depends not on visible strength, but on invisible maintenance, on people doing their jobs, on systems being quietly upheld. When those systems withdraw without replacement, the change is not explosive. It is absorptive. Communities absorb the loss until they no longer remember what was absorbed. That forgetting is not failure. It is survival. The empire's end does not feel like loss to everyone. To some it feels like release. Less tax, less oversight, less obligation to distant rulers. Autonomy grows in the cracks left behind. Freedom, however, comes with responsibility. And responsibility is heavy when shared unevenly. This night marks the transfer of burden, from empire to individual, from system to community, from certainty to improvisation. No one votes on this change. No one consents. It simply happens. The listener lying awake long after the story ends might feel a strange discomfort. Not fear, not sadness, just recognition. Because history, when stripped of spectacle, begins to resemble the present more than we like. Empires today will not end with fireworks either. They will end with delayed responses, unreturned calls, empty offices, and assumptions that someone else is still watching the gate. That is why this night matters. Not because it was loud, but because it was quiet enough to be missed. Britain's Roman chapter closes without ceremony. The book remains open, but the language will change. The handwriting will grow rougher, the margins wider, the pace slower. This is not the end of civilization. It is the end of supervision. And supervision, once gone, is very difficult to replace. The night passes, morning arrives, life resumes. Somewhere a gate stands unattended. Not broken, not forced open, just no longer guarded. And that, in the end, is how empires truly fall. Empires do not collapse when walls come down. They collapse when no one is left guarding the gate.